I'm standing here atop Har Kabir, a tall mountain with a gorgeous view down to the city of Shekhem in the valley. Shekhem, the place where Abraham Abinu first stopped in Eretz Canaan to build a Mizbeach, the place where Yaakov Abinu first stopped when he came back from Aram Naharaim from the house of Laban, and the place where Yoshua and Bnei Israel established a covenant, a berit, with the Beracha on Har Gerizim, that's the further mountain range over here, and the Qilalah here on Har Ebal, that's the closer mountain range here. So the questions I want to address in this video are, first of all, what does Shekhem mean? Where does this name come from? Secondly, how did this region become associated with Yosef? We know that Yosef is buried down in Shekhem. And finally, I want to talk about the rivalry between the tribes of Yehuda and Yosef, what each of them represent, how it develops in Sefer Bereshit, and finally, what it means for us today. So Shekhem is a part of the body. We have our two shoulders, our ktefaim, and then the area on the upper back between the shoulders, that's known as the Shekhem, a place where you typically would carry a bag or some sort of burden. So for example, when we're leaving Mitzrayim, it says Mish'arotam sirot b'simlotam al shechmam, the leftovers wrapped up in a cloth carried on their upper back. Or when Abraham sends away Hagar and Ishmael, he says he gives her lechem mehemet mayim, bread and a container of water, sam al shechma, puts it on her back and sends her off. Or in the Beracha of Yisachar that he gets from Yaakov, his father, it says Yisachar hamor garim, is compared to a strong boned donkey, and later it says Vayet shechmo lisbol, vayhi lemas obed, and he outstretches his upper back to accept a burden, to accept the load, as a donkey typically would, a beast of burden. So when we look at Shekhem, the city, it's located in a valley between two shoulders. The two shoulders are Har Gerizim and Har Ebal. The valley between them is this Shekhem, and it is here that we accept a burden. We accept all Malchut Shamayim in the days of Yoshua when we have the Beracha and the Qilalah and we make that Berit. Now we saw in the Beracha of Yisachar that there seems to be some connection between Hamor, the donkey, and Shekhem, which is very interesting because in the days of Yaakov, when he comes into contact with the people of Shekhem, the king of Shekhem in those days, his name was Hamor. So I think this is a key to understanding the symbolism of this place and what's going on in this new covenant with Har Gerizim, Har Ebal, because Hamor reminds us of Homriut. Homriut is materialism, physicality. Hamarim are materials. And this is very different from what's happening at Har Sinai earlier on. So at Har Sinai, everything's very spiritual, coming from above. The nation stands at the bottom. They look up towards Har Sinai, up towards the heavens. Kadosh Baruch Hu is speaking to us. Here in Shekhem, everything's reversed. We have the nation standing on either sides of the mountains, and the Levim standing at the bottom, and the focus is towards the ground, towards the physical aspects of how we're going to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how we're going to accept the Beracha, the Qilalah, the Misvot. Now fast forward to the days of Shlomo HaMelech, and we have a successful partnership emerging between using the material and the spiritual together to worship HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because Shlomo HaMelech, he levies heavy taxes on the entire nation, amasses material wealth, but to build the spiritual edifice of the Beit HaMikdash in Yerushalayim. However, after Shlomo HaMelech dies, his son Rehoboam tries to abuse that power. He wants to continue collecting heavy taxes, but the nation doesn't feel that there's any spiritual justification anymore, and there ends up being a conflict. The conflict is here, of all places, in Shekhem. Rehoboam comes to Shekhem to be appointed as king over all of Israel, but the 10 northern tribes decide to sever ties with his kingship, with Malchut Yehuda, with Yerushalayim. They appoint their own king, Rehoboam ben Nebat, and the two kingdoms go their separate ways. Now in our own generation, we will return to Eretz Israel. Again, we can have national goals that are physical, material, not just spiritual. And perhaps the mission of our generation is to reestablish this partnership between the spiritual, the physical, Yehuda and Yosef. As it says in Sefer Yehezkel, the prophet is told to take two sticks. One says Yosef on it, one says Yehuda, and he combines them to become one in his hand. V'hayu la'ahadim b'yadecha. So now that we've talked about this partnership, I think we can go back to the question of why does Yosef merit to get this portion, the city of Shechem? Why is he buried here? Why is he the hero of Shechem? I think the secret is in the story where Yosef is sent to seek out his brothers. They're supposed to be in Shechem, but when he gets to Shechem, he doesn't find them. He wanders around looking for them. Now at this point, one couldn't blame him if he were to just simply turn around and go back home. After all, he has every reason to believe that they're not so fond of him. But instead he insists. when a man finds him and asks him what he's looking for, he says, I'm looking for my brothers. He wants to reconcile with them, reunite with them. Perhaps he's naive, and we know, of course, afterwards, this is taken advantage of by Yehuda, who turns it into his own profit, his own material gain when they sell Yosef as a slave. And this way, this taking advantage is similar to what happened later on when Rehoboam tries to take advantage of the material wealth and use it for his own gain. But nonetheless, because of Yosef's noble intentions, the Ramban writes that this whole story is only told in the Torah to teach us the greatness of Yosef, that he wanted to reconcile with his brothers. For this reason, perhaps the reward is that he gets Shekhem, he's buried and becomes the hero of Shekhem.